The people of Messina pitied them, ministered to them, and became infected. In the following year, 1348, the bubonic plague spread all across Europe. In France, the plague carried away about 1/3 of the entire population. In cities like Florence, in Siena, in Tuscany, 1 out of every 2 citizens died. To compound the problem was the fact that there was a total lack of urban sanitation. This is universal to medieval towns and villages. Narrow streets were cesspools of excrement, and ordinarily the housewife or the chambermaid would simply take the chamber pot and dump it out the window onto the street below. This is why, even to this day, as a courtesy to women, men are expected to walk on the outside when they're walking down the street, because they would be the recipients of the chamber pot more likely than women. Everywhere in medieval town, there were dead animals. Nobody ever buried a dead animal. When the animal died, you just walked over it. Outside the butcher shops, there were animal entrails, hoofs, whatever the butcher didn't need, he threw out onto the street. There was garbage everywhere, and nobody ever seemed to care about the garbage. Now, admittedly, garbage is always an ongoing problem. Some people thought that perhaps holding sweet-smelling flowers in their noses all the time, which would ward off the noxious odors and vapors, might possibly be a remedy for plague. So often people went around with sweet-smelling, fragrant flowers. The first symptom of infection was a rose-colored ring on the skin, which produces, it eventually becomes a blotch. But that kind of rose-colored ring with a dot in the center was the first sign. It gave us the nursery rhyme, ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes to ashes, and we'll all fall down. That refers to the Black Plague. There was a dreadful epidemic, which I'm sure you're aware of, in London in 1365. But eventually that plague was stopped because the government, the royal family, actually suggested that they burn down the central portion of London. So they gave us the Great Fire of London in 1665. The plague still erupts today in such arcane places as Bombay and Uganda, New Mexico, and recently in New York City. The one thing you should know about the plague is that it is treatable, readily treatable, with today's antibiotics.
The articles right now, that one of the articles that I want to go through in detail, because it's a great article. You just have to really understand it. I mean, get into it deep to understand it. But here are some of the things we're facing. Here's drugs to combat superbugs will soon be useless. Because, you know why? Because they're building so fast and mutating. They've become immune to the drugs that once killed them, and or killed some of them, didn't kill all of them, and they've become immune to it. And they're really not superbugs; they're just the same things, but they survive because of science and going against Yahweh's law.
Michael Lemonick, the cover story in Time magazine this week: revenge of the killer microbes. Are we losing the war against the infectious diseases, is the question that he raises and addresses in this cover story. For wherever we go and whatever we do, we are accosted by invaders from an unseen world. Protozoans, bacteria, viruses, a whole menagerie of microscopic pests constantly assaults every part of our body, looking for a way inside. Many are harmless or easy to fight. Others, as we are now so often reminded, are merciless killers. What are we talking about here, Mike?
Well, we're talking about the fact that the bacterial world and the viral world is all around us, and only in the last 30 or 40 years have we learned to fight them at all, pretty much. We've had antibiotics, we've had more and more vaccines against viruses, and we've lulled ourselves into thinking that we have finally won this war, that we have defeated microbes, that this battle that we believed we were winning for the past several decades, we are now not winning anymore, and we're actually losing ground.
And what happened?
Well, two things happened. One is that the antibiotics that we developed, starting with penicillin and then with the whole rash of antibiotics that came out after World War II, worked for a while. One by one, the antibiotics that used to be effective against all bacteria are effective against fewer and fewer. And so you now have cases of drug-resistant tuberculosis.
To understand that, you have a disease that's communicable through air.
Kila sehemu ya hilo shamba ilikuwa na diamond. Inajaribu kutueleza ya kwamba ukiwa na shamba kimaanisha mwili yako ni kama shamba lako. Ukiikuza itakuwa inadumu na itakupatia faida kama diamond hii ambayo huyo Ali alikuwa anaenda kutafuta. Tusimame.
Where did Speaker contract TB?
My son-in-law's TB did not originate from myself or the CDC labs.
Speaker says he may have gotten it on a fundraising trip to hospitals in Southeast Asia. Doctors say Speaker has been globe-trotting for 6 years, and they still don't know where he contracted it.
You have cases of drug-resistant staph and strep.
These are things that are making a comeback because they're overcoming the drugs.
That's right. We somehow forgot that the viruses that we had and the bacteria that we had in, say, 1950 was not the end of it, was not the end of the story, because new viruses and new bacteria are emerging all the time from, say, animal populations, to cite one example. Yeah.
When it comes to dogs, cats, and kids, sharing just comes naturally. They share their toys, their beds, even their favorite snacks. But pets and people can share other things as well, like disease. Zoonotic diseases are illnesses that can be transmitted from animals to humans, like leptospirosis.